Oh, that's quality words. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the October 2012 Suffolk County Council on Environmental Quality meeting. We'd like to begin. First off, has anyone read the August 2012 minutes?
I was not there at the August meeting, so I can't.
How about the September 2012 minutes?
September I read, and I am satisfied that they are good representation of what happened.
Do we have a second?
I will move it.
I'll second it. Okay, all in favor? Motion passed. All right.
I abstain.
We'll hopefully have next month or next meeting, August 2012 meetings, the minutes that we can vote on. Okay, everybody? Correspondence. Michael, any correspondence we should be aware
No correspondence this month.
Nothing at all? Okay. I just want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting. If there is an item on the agenda that you would like to speak about, please wait until we discuss that item. You're more than welcome to come up and state your opinion. All right? The Historic Trust docket, do you have? Good morning, Rich.
Again, on my updates on the housing program, the Bayman's Cottage over at West Sable at the Maritime Museum. There's a new tenant moving in there. That's a studio apartment that's in one of the historic buildings, and that rent is helpful to the Maritime Museum because it does go directly to them, and it also helps protect that site with having someone living there. So that's to be refilled. Otherwise, our buildings that are available to be rented are filled at this point. And just the update on the custodial agreements. The Deep Wells amendment to their contract is going to the county attorney's office for review.
What is that amendment?
It's to extend their contract. They have an existing contract, but it's being amended and extended. Before this would happen without as much involvement with the county attorney's office. They're actually re-reviewing the contracts at this point and updating them. So that's what's going on with Deep Wells. Also with the Saginaw Coast Manor contract, that has been updated with the new contract, and it's gone to the Historic Society for their signature. So that's moving forward. Work is now being started on the new contract for Oldfield Farm. That's with Sally Lynch, and then I think, just to remind you, we had agreed and approved her as a custodian of the site, as an historic site, and not a concessionaire. So this is a new contract for her, which is in line with all our other historic sites.
What's the difference between a custodian and a
concessionaire? Would be like Lessing's Catering. It's as a business. That never really made sense for that site. It's really run as an historic site, as a nonprofit. Her organization is a nonprofit organization, so it's not a business per se. So it really was the wrong contract to start with. So now we're reverting to the historic custodial contract.
Is there any advantage to the county or to her?
To both. This, like when we have the concessionaire contract, it puts a lot of the responsibility and the requirements for investment on the concessionaire. The fundraising there, was maintaining the main buildings, but not all the buildings. Now, by putting it as an historic trust site, that within a custodial agreement with her, parks can now go in, and I can use my historic budget at that site. Where before I was limited because of the kind of contract we have.
Did you say that's been executed, or that's
it's being worked on now? It's being initiated now.
Rich, they can still do fundraising there.
Oh, sure.
And they can still have a concession there to help facilitate their fundraising efforts.
What do you mean by concession?
Well, usually in business, concession is some sort of like little area where some people sell things.
Oh, sure. That's all part of the gift shop or sales or anything.
Gift shops, yeah.
Yeah, all the fundraising, can be accommodated. And then, of course, all the fundraising that's done on site has to go back to the site. That's the requirement of our historic contracts. So even though it's a nonprofit, they can't take the money they raise there and use it on another project down the street. It all has to go back to that historic site.
Basically, it's an authorized ancillary use, is what you're saying.
But those are all covered under
Yes,
the
it's
historic
under a use.
custodial agreements.
Yeah, okay.
But it's just not a run as a business. You know,
Right.
it's
It's a
different.
use, it's a use thing.
Yes.
Okay.
The Maritime Museum contract is still being negotiated between Parks and the Maritime Museum. I don't know what all the issues are that's holding it up at this point. But it is a complicated one, and it's their requirements. Parks is asking them to do a lot more than before, so I think that's part of the holdup here. And that's all I have to report today, except also just that things are moving along well at the Homan House, the stabilization and the beginning of the restoration there. And we're very happy. The relationship between the contractor and the Yaphank Historical Society that's jumped in and done a lot of the work, including the stone foundation to the building. So it's a very good working relationship between the Historic Society and the county there.
Do they repoint over there, or what are they doing with the foundation? I was talking to one of them.
I'll pass
6
around
weeks ago.
pictures. You can take a look. There's all different issues we had with that foundation. The building was in really bad shape, so there was a lot of framing work that had to be either replaced or new framing to keep the building standing. And then some areas of the foundation were totally rebuilt, and others were repointed. So there's a different. Every wall
So you had to go
section
back.
was treated differently, depending on what was needed to be
Who's
done.
the lead on that at the Historical Society over there?
Say that again. Oh,
Who's-
Robert Kessler.
Yeah, that's the name I couldn't
Right.
remember.
So if you'd like, I could. Annie's around. You could just see the kind
No,
of
not that Kessler.
work that's being done. And also, you'll see this tarped section in the back. We've stabilized the building, and now we still have enough money to go to the back wing and reconstruct that, which had fallen away. So that will go forward. And then the Historic Society, the building will be safe for them to come in and start doing additional work and to bring contractors in to continue the restoration.
Anything else, Rich?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, project review. Recommended unlisted actions. Proposed acquisition of land for open space preservation purposes known as the 6 Pierre Point LLC property, town of Southampton. Who will be speaking for this project?
It's an acquisition. Come on, Loretta.
I didn't see you at first, Loretta. Good morning. I was thinking, where is she? She's not here.
Called this early.
Really, I'm so done.
Did you get coffee?
Such a put on hers today. The first proposed acquisition before you this morning is the Pierre Pont LLC property in the town of Southampton. This is a 29.21 acre acquisition with a 50-50 match with the town of Southampton. South of Old Country Road, in the hamlet of West Hampton, north of the village of West Hampton, near Beaver Lake, and Beaver Dam Creek. There are 2 cutouts that will not be acquired of the property. A 3-acre portion on the southern portion of the triangle, which is actually going to be acquired by a cemetery association, and the 0.9 acres on the corner, the northeast corner of the property is actually going to be acquired by the town for roadway purposes. This property there are 2 lots, one directly on Beaver Dam Creek, south of Montauk Highway, and then the majority of the property is on the second lot to the north of Montauk Highway between Old Country Road and Montauk Highway. There are wetlands on the southern portion of the property, all within the watershed of Beaver Dam Creek in the town of Southampton.
Any questions? Go ahead, Rich.
It looks like on the northern side of Montauk Highway, there's some kind of use, like a driveway or
Yes,
something.
that was the location of the former hotel. This is the Bailey's Hotel, which the structure has been removed from the property. So there was a former use on
There's
the
no buried
property.
oil tanks or cesspool?
That was all reviewed on, through the ESA report, and there was no findings.
There was a phase 1 and a phase 2,
Phase
and
two.
there was no concerns.
You did a phase 2, or somebody did a phase 2 also?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, any other
Well,
questions?
Looks like it's unlisted. Neg deck.
Second.
Seconded by Eva. All in favor? Motion passed. Thank you, Loretta. Next.
The next three actually are all in another Beaver Dam Creek, this one being in the town of Brookhaven. Split up into three portions. The first one is the Bodkin properties. That consists of 2 lots, totaling 0.28 acres. On your map, it's depicted in the red color, the 2 lots in red, on the easterly side of the holdings along Beaver Dam Creek, and within the watershed.
Right over here.
And again, this is an area that we've targeted for acquisition. Numerous parcels making up this area, old file map area, and we're trying to complete and consolidate our holdings
Loretta?
in this area. Yes.
Where's Beaver Dam in this map?
Beaver Dam is along this roadway, along the striped parcel.
Okay. It's to the east of the acquisition parcel.
Correct.
Parcel then. Okay, so this is just basically infilling of what the county has been acquiring and the towns have been acquiring recently.
Yes, as well as Post-Morrow Foundation. They have also done some significant acquisitions within this area as well.
What's the depth of groundwater over here, do you know?
Well, it's pretty low. You're very close to the river there, number 1. And number 2, it is a low-lying area, South Shore area. I don't know offhand, but probably within a couple feet.
Rich?
Unlisted neg deck. Made a motion.
You make a
Second.
okay.
I'll second.
Okay, what I would like to do for these 3 acquisitions, since they're all in the same area, I would like to vote as one for all 3. All right, so it's the Bodkin property, is it pronounced Gula, Loretta? G-E-U-L-A?
Guella.
Guella and Bodkin property, and the third, the Guella property. So we have the 3 properties in this area as shown on that one map.
It's all the same map, and
Yes.
it's all
Yes,
the same
yes.
infilling.
So
Yeah.
So,
Make
you know,
make a motion just to say.
unlisted neg deck for all 3.
Second.
Seconded by Eva. All in favor? Motion passed.
Thank you. And then the last one for you today is, in addition to the Norfolk Reserve holdings that we recently bought last year, these are 3 lots totaling 3 acres along Sound Avenue in the town of Riverhead. There are 3 buildings on the properties, one being a residential, utilized as a residential home at this time, and 2 other barns and a garage structure with possible office space available. Those buildings will be utilized in conjunction with the North Fork Preserve active recreation and passive recreation to the north, and the 2 maintenance buildings will be utilized by parks for maintaining the site for their equipment, etc. The residents will be utilized as a caretaker residence and check-in station for the entire site. It is situated right at the existing entrance to the North Fork Preserve, as you can see, to the left of the last property.
Okay, Loretta, can you just, where exactly is the North Fork Preserve?
Just north, all the properties just to the north of
All of this?
That,
More of the
all of
wooded
that.
area.
This whole area.
The
Okay.
wooded-
Thank you, I
and-
wasn't sure.
And the cleared area, there's also a cleared area
Yeah,
there too.
that's
Yes,
part of it too?
Yes.
Is that a home in the back part of it?
It's a barn, yes.
It's a barn.
Barn, one barn, and then the other is a garage structure.
No,
How many total
I'm
acres?
sorry.
This.
Oh, with the tennis courts?
Oh, that's the, their clubhouse. We own that at the present time. That's
Okay.
part of the North Fork Preserve.
What's the total acreage of the preserve up there?
About 300 acres in total.
Kara asked a good question, not to pin her or anything, but we've got the clubhouse up there, and we're getting additional structures over here. What's going to be happening with the clubhouse?
Yeah, maybe you can
Yeah, we have
address
we converted part of the clubhouse to an apartment space, and we have a tenant in it now. We also have a seasonal employee that manages the property, and the equipment is kept. The clubhouse had had finished spaces and a garage space, and we're using the garage space primarily right now.
So basically, to maintain the property and utilize it during the summer, which is when its primary use will be, you're going to use both the clubhouse and also these structures to the south. I
This
guess.
will not be enough infrastructure to operate the park as we envision operating it someday. It's a conceptual site plan.
Yeah, because I remember
We've
there's
gone over
camping and
here,
stuff
yeah.
like that up there. So you what you're
Someday
saying is-
we'll need a whole bunch more than is currently there, but for the current situation of the property, just maintaining the trails and the property as is. We're operating out of the clubhouse space, and the proposed acquisition is for an additional 2 barn structures and the residence.
So basically, then you're looking forward in time today. You're looking forward, say 5 years, 10 years, whatever, until this property gets developed, and at that time, you're saying you will need these structures.
We'll use them more sooner than that.
Sooner than
We'll
that.
use them to store additional equipment that we don't have the ability to do so up at the clubhouse. These were part and parcel of the operation at the time, and they use them in the same way we would, for the storage of equipment, etc.
And the residents currently, when you have this vision of the future, what will that still be a residence, or will it become offices, or?
In the short term, I think we ask that we continue the residential use until which time there's a capital project to actually move forward with the implementation, or the development first of a master plan and then the implementation thereafter. Until that point in time, we see no reason to not continue the residential use. So have to go through the housing program, etc.
Right.
Phase 1, Phase 2 done?
Yes.
I think that's
Yes,
completed.
Yeah,
Yes,
no
they were
concerns.
completed.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
I'll
Is
make
there
a
a
motion, unlisted neg deck.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Eva. Okay, all in favor? Motion passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Loretta. Okay, moving on. Recommended type 2 actions. Ratification of recommendations for legislative resolutions laid on the table October 9th, 2012. Mike, are there any concerns that we should know
No
about?
concerns. I just wanted to bring your attention to 1939. I know it's come up here in the past. This is a resolution put in prohibiting the use of hydraulic fracturing brine on county property or roadways. Just thought you might want to be aware of that. And also 1948, the official county secret determination for the Bergen Point outfall that came out of last month's meeting.
So, if I understand it now, in addition to the brine, Kara also introduced
Yeah, see it.
the notion of not taking it into the sewage treatment plant. So we have
Yes.
2 separate actions, which is very good.
Yeah.
Basically, I think as uses are discovered, if you will, for this brine, basically our legislators are saying not here, basically. Because I've been hearing a lot that the hydraulic fracking waste with all the chemicals that they've got in there, upstate they're talking about using them literally on the roadways as de-icers, things like that.
Okay.
Especially when
Nice
we
car.
can't really handle it. This one is not black. We can't really handle road water runoff.
Yeah.
No, right,
Then it goes
exactly.
right
Where the hell does it go?
Is-
Motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Eva. All in favor? Motion passed. Okay, the next is Vector Control 2013 Annual Plan of Work. Good morning, Dominic. Please state your name for the record.
Dominic Minavaji. I'm the superintendent of Division of Vector Control in the Department of Public Works. And as I'm sure, as I noted in the cover memo, county charter requires Vector Control to submit an annual plan of work each year to the legislature for approval. So that's what this document is for. This document is based on the county's Vector Control and Wetlands Management long-term plan and generic EIS, which was passed in 2007. And this plan of work conforms to the plan and the GEIS, which is why there's basically no further actions required under SEQA. I submitted a short form EAF to that effect. Again, this plan of work follows along very similar to the last few years with the passing of the GEIS. Few minor changes are that we're still waiting for the wetland stewardship program to come up with a wetlands stewardship plan that will outline the best management practices we would use for water management. So right now we're continuing, as we've done for the last few years, to just do maintenance type activities. And we'll wait and see if the wetland stewardship plan is finally approved. If it is, we might undertake some additional wetlands management, and that will conform to the stewardship plan. And if it's a more intensive project, requires a DEC permit, that would go to the CEQ separately, so there would be continued review of the water management work. The suite of pesticides we're using is again the same as in previous years. In some cases, particularly with the Bacillus sphaericus, we've changed product name for an equivalent product. We're using Spiritax instead of Vectilex for Bacillus sphaericus, and that's basically material went out to bid. They're equivalent products. We got a better price for Spiritax, so that's what we're using. There's been all the protocols that we follow for control of larval and adult mosquitoes are continuing to be followed. This year we had to file a notice of intent under the Clean Water Act based on litigation over the years, which we did so uneventfully. It doesn't change the program, it just adds an additional legal layer. Public education, as I'm sure you know, the county has undergone some financial hard times. We lost about 5 people through layoffs and early retirements. Health department is in charge of public education, although we certainly assist them, and when our guys are in the field, they are in fact educators. Unfortunately, the one person that health department had working on public education for ticks and mosquitoes was laid off. So that has not made things any easier, but we are still trying to educate people as best we can within the resources we have available. We added a little wrinkle to the public notification. Public notification for adulticide is covered under a couple of county statutes as far as putting notices out in the web. And last year we added code red notification. We're not required to do public notice for larvicide, but in the last few years I sent out an email blast to people, to government agencies or adjacent landowners that had an interest in the aerial larvicide, and Health Department added putting that on the web. So again, that's not required, but that's something we added just for additional public notification, let people know what we're up to. This year, Last year and this year, we found an increase in a new mosquito in our area, the Asian tiger mosquito, which is a species that came over to this country from Southeast Asia. It's a real problem species. I'm starting to call it, well, since this is a public meeting, it's the mosquito from heck. But you can imagine, because it's a very aggressive biting species, bites in the daytime, and the larvae are found basically in containers. So it could be any kind of container around the house, a paper cup, a flower pot, a bird bath. One of my field guys found a cat food can under a bush, and there were Asian tiger mosquito larvae. It's become very widespread, particularly in the western part of the county. This year we had a particular problem with it because it's a subtropical origin and it doesn't like really cold winters, but of course we had one of the warmest winters we ever had, so that got them started very nicely for us this year. The other problem that we've had with that species is that it doesn't come very well to the traditional traps we use for surveillance, the CDC light and gravid traps. There's a specialized trap that's supposed to be good for that species called the BG Sentinel that does catch them. But one of the things we did, part of our the special surveys and special projects we do every year, is our entomologist, Ilya Rochlin, found that if you use the commercial mosquito magnet and add particular lures to it, that you can catch quite a lot of these Asian tiger mosquitoes. And that is a very good surveillance tool. It not only catches Asian tiger mosquitoes, it catches Aedes japonicus, a similar species from further north, which fortunately is not as aggressive a biter. It catches many of our other native species. So that was a very worthwhile thing to do. It's something we'd like to expand, because the first thing you have to do when you're dealing with a situation like this is define the problem, and to do that you need a good surveillance tool. So that was a worthwhile thing to do. We plan on adding more of these in the coming year to have a better understanding of the species. And what we found so far is not encouraging. It starts to get abundant in June. It seems to peak in July, but it's in high numbers through August into September. And as of last week, we were still catching them in substantial numbers. So it's a mosquito that has a very long season. Fortunately, the last few weeks we've had some cool weather. They've been less of a problem with biting people, but they're still out there. We did some virus testing for the species. We did have one sample come back positive, which is not surprising. Other people have found the same thing. And it is an efficient transmitter. Fortunately, the infection rate seems to be pretty low. They don't seem to bite birds very often. But it is a concern for West Nile virus. So we're going to continue to try to figure out techniques that might work on this species. The problem is, all the techniques I've seen tend to be very labor intensive and expensive, which is not surprising when you're talking about a mosquito that has such a difficult habitat. Salt marsh mosquitoes, for all the problems they cause, at least you know where the salt marsh is, you know where to look, you know how to deal with the larvae. With this, it's a door-to-door problem. We get a lot of service calls on them, and we do respond, and we try to get rid of the sources, but it's a very difficult problem. So we're going to continue to try to find improved techniques. I know there's research out there on the horizon for more innovative techniques, such as sterile mail release, things like that, but those are out in the future. So this is going to be a problem, and I'm certainly hoping for a very cold winter to hopefully knock them back a little bit for next year. But that's the work plan for this year. There's a report on our pesticide use. We had a lot of virus activities this year, about 210 positives, but once again we were very focused in our response. Our Our acreage of larvicide was about 18,595 acres, which is relatively low. Adulticide acreage, a little over 23,000. To put that in some perspective, last year was about 16,000. Our highest year was 2010, where we had a lot of human activity for West Nile, and that was 54,000. So this was an average to below average year for pesticide use. So that's the plan going forward, is to continue that kind of program we've been running under DEIS.
Thank you, Dominic. Larry?
3 questions. I guess I'm glad that this was a less than average year for pesticides, but can you, I got 3 questions. Can you give us a review of sort of where we stand nationally with West Nile? Because I've heard in papers and so forth that it's getting worse and worse. The second is, were any of the products that you used this year implicated in the reports from Connecticut about lobsters having concentrations of mosquito spray materials? And the third is, it seems to me we're very, very far behind in the wetlands management plan. What's going on there?
Okay, well, as far as nationally, this was, I believe, the second highest year nationwide for human cases of West Nile virus. Most of the activity and the human activity was in the central part of the country, especially Texas. Texas accounted for a very large proportion of the human cases. And one of the things we've learned about West Nile virus, and it sounds counterintuitive, but in hot, dry weather, you actually tend to get more virus activity. The mosquitoes that are involved in the cycle are polluted water mosquitoes. When you have dry conditions in the drainage areas and places like that, you get a lot of polluted water. So they had this problem, and again, the biggest problem was in Texas. They did some extensive treatments down there. I'm waiting to see, and I hope to see at the mosquito meetings in the coming year how effective those treatments were. They used a product that we don't have available here yet called Duet, which has 2 active ingredients. One is basically the same as Anvil. The other one is a short-lived pyrethroid that basically stirs up the mosquitoes, gets them flying, which apparently helps it for Asian tiger mosquitoes. So I'll be anxious to see if that material worked for them. This year, we had a lot of detections of virus. We have 4 confirmed human cases of West Nile virus in the county. If you look at probables or suspect, I believe we're up to about 12. Some of those will probably drop out. That compares to our highest year, which we had, I believe, 26. Last year we had 4, so it's a mid-range year for us for West Nile virus, despite a lot of detections, 210. And one of the things we're learning is that you can detect virus in Culex mosquitoes, which primarily bite birds, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's very high human risks. So one of the things we're trying to continually do is refine where we need to treat. The southwest part of the county and Babylon seems to be a hot area for human cases. We treated that area by air in early August, and we looked at the results in terms of virus activity, and there's good evidence that the aerial treatments we did reduce virus activity compared to untreated areas. So, we're happy with the results we got in terms of reduction of virus activity, and we're going to continue to try to refine our protocols and techniques for that. The lobster issue is very much up in the air. Connecticut DEP did a small amount of sampling, and their preliminary analysis was that they detected resmethrin, which is the active ingredient in scourge in lobsters, and methoprene, which is the active ingredient in the Alticid products. There are a lot of questions about that sampling. There's very few samples tested. There seemed to be no relationship between what they found and whether lobsters were sick or not. I think there were about 10 samples. And basically the levels that they found are really hard to explain by any conventional understanding of the way these materials behave in the environment. There would have to be several thousand-fold amplification or concentration of these to get these levels in the lobsters, which doesn't make a lot of sense because we've never seen that in these materials. How the material somehow got out to the middle of the sound, nobody can explain. So we're waiting to see if they can confirm. And the other thing about this is that finding these materials at these low levels in tissues is technically extremely difficult. So we're waiting to find out whether that information can be confirmed by an independent lab. We haven't seen that yet. What I can say is that those samples were detected in 2011, which was an extremely low year for treatments. We had no treatments with resmethrin north of the Long Island Expressway. So if they found resmethrin, it wasn't from us. Methoprene is used very little in the North Shore. So again, if they found methoprene, I don't see how it was from us. One thing I found out in looking at this is that it turns out only about 10% of the methoprene that's used is used in mosquito control products. The other 90% is in a whole range of products, ranging from agricultural products. Apparently, you feed this to cattle, and it goes through them and comes out the other end, and the methoprene then prevents flies from developing in the manure. So this is a very interesting use of this material. It's used in flea control products. It's on my dog's fur. It's used, for instance, if you have spray treatment around the house. Again, if there was methoprene, which is questionable, it's very questionable whether it came from mosquito control.
You and I had discussed this a long time ago. You're not seeing it in the intermediate areas. Basically, you're not seeing it along the shoreline,
no.
And you're not seeing it in the crabs and other types of molting benthic populations. Apparently, these lobsters came only from the deep sound, so you're not seeing, if you will, a track.
See, this is one of the things that we find very puzzling, and everybody who looked at this found this very puzzling, is that when you go to a marsh where you deliberately are putting the material, it disappears very quickly, and even right after the spray, it's at extremely low levels. So how you get the material out to the middle of the sound, it's really hard to understand.
And again, you're not seeing it in the animals where in the higher reaches of the food chain, in the marshes.
No, and the other thing, I took a look at, as far as the issue of methoprene and crustaceans, I decided, well, if there's a crustacean that might be impacted by methoprene, you'd pick a crustacean that lives in an area where we use most of our methoprene, where it lives in shallow water, and where you have, the worst case exposure. And the animal you could choose for that is the blue crab, which we have, landing data that goes back quite a long way, because we are putting methoprene right in the salt marshes, right around Great South Bay, where a lot of our blue crabs come from. Well, I have 12 years of attached data during which we used methoprene, and I compared that to 12 years of data prior to using methoprene. And the average catch in a given year during the methoprene era was about 1 million pounds per year. The 12 years prior to methoprene, about 500,000 pounds per year. And as I said in the town of East Hampton yesterday, that certainly doesn't mean methoprene is some kind of crab vitamin that is producing lots of crabs, but on the other hand, it certainly doesn't fit with the concept that it's some kind of deadly poison.
Well, what's different about lobster? What do they eat versus the crabs?
Well,
what did they test the crabs' meat?
Lobsters are in much deeper water. They're larger, so it would take more pesticide to harm them. All the things about lobsters would militate against them being impacted. If you would expect any impact, you'd far more likely to see it in the crabs.
Well, but maybe the lobsters are eating something that
Yeah, but
needs
They're both
habitat.
scavengers. You know, they're both in a similar place in the food chain. You know, it's just really, you really have to reach. You really have to come up with tremendously complex schemes to somehow say that, yeah, it killed the lobsters, but it left the crabs alone.
the crabs are
So the
filter
simplest
feeders, though.
explanation is, based on all the science we know, based on the known toxicology, the simplest explanation by far is that there's no relationship between methoprene and either of these animals.
Have you ever tested crabs for the presence of?
No, we haven't tested crabs, and we actually thought about doing that.
Yeah, right,
But one of the things, again, one of the flaws of this Connecticut sampling is that they only looked at malathion, resmethrin, and methoprene. Now, we certainly know that lobsters are exposed to a lot more toxics and to things that are a lot more toxic than those materials. So any fair analysis of whether toxics are killing lobsters, you should look at all the toxins. But they didn't do that. I guarantee you'll find DDT, you'll find metals, you'll find PCBs, you'll find lots of things if you grind up lobsters or crabs and analyze them. And one of the things we looked at, we said, okay, if we go out and do an analysis for crabs, the chances of finding methoprene are microscopic, but the chances of finding all these other materials is actually pretty good, because when people have looked in the past, they found those things. So what are we accomplishing by doing that? All we're accomplishing is basically putting something out there that there are minute levels of toxics in crabs, which I'm sure the crab fishery is not going to appreciate, and it basically has no bearing on anything. So, we decided that it didn't really pay. The other thing we realized, it's not an easy or cheap thing to do, and in an era of limited resources, it didn't make a lot of sense.
I was talking to Vinnie Palmer a couple of weeks ago. Vinnie Palmer has a lot of responsibilities down here for pesticides and things like that at DEC. And doesn't the state have the ability to take a couple of samples and just randomly run them?
Yeah, the state could do that if it chose to do that. But again, we looked at this and we said, we don't see a problem with our crabs.
Yeah,
They're catching
that's what
plenty
Vinnie was
of
saying to me
crabs.
also.
We've done excellent work with USGS and Stony Brook University. We have a pretty good understanding of what happens to methoprene when we put it in the salt marsh. We've got a pretty good understanding that any kind of impact is extremely, extremely unlikely. So I think that it was worth looking at. We spent a lot of money on this. We spent a lot of time, but we continue to look at the literature through the Pesticide Management Committee, but we just don't see anything that justifies continually throwing county resources at this problem. It doesn't seem to be a problem.
But the problem is that the fishing industry is targeting mosquito control as the source of their problem of lobsters, and so your public education effort of getting out some of the things that you just said about where these materials are found in other parts of the environment. It seems to me that's important to get out. Not that you should be using it as an excuse, but there's not very much understanding of how this stuff gets into the environment and how it's transported in the environment. In the lobsters, it could be in the bait.
There could be a lot of things. It could have been on the decks.
Yeah.
Sampled.
So
it could. I think that I know the American Mosquito Control Association did write a letter with numerous citations to the literature to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council, again to try to bring some science to the debate. And one of the things that we do know about lobsters is that lobsters are cold water animals, And during the times that we've had these mortalities, we've had high temperatures, and in some cases, particularly in 1999, there was a spike in temperatures, which has been gone over in the lobster studies. And you don't need to come up with a wild or stretch the science on methoprene to come up with why the lobsters die. It's really pretty simple. As Dr. Alistair Dove said from Stony Brook, climate is the culprit here. Climate killed the lobsters. And the reality is, Long Island Sound is the southern limit of a northern species, the lobster. You know, the prime habitat for the lobster is not Long Island Sound. The prime habitat for the lobster is you go up into Massachusetts, Maine, Canada. So it should surprise no one that a lobster, an animal that's on the very edge of its range, that's on the very edge of its temperature tolerance, should occasionally have mortalities. That's very understandable, and it doesn't require complicated science to understand that.
Karen.
Yes, no, I agree with everything you said. However, when you began the conversation, you said, you know, you can't really figure out why methoprene was showing up in lobster meat when it wasn't showing up in crab meat. But then you said you didn't test the crabs.
No, what I said is that if methoprene was highly toxic, and again, the claim is not some subtle effect. The claim is that you put alticid pellets in a storm drain and lobsters 5 miles out in the sound die. That's the claim. So that's acute toxicity. And acute toxicity of methoprene is extremely well understood because you can take an animal in the lab, you expose it to methoprene at a known level, do they die or not? That's really well known. And when you look at that kind of information, you find that the amount of methoprene it takes to kill an adult lobster is extraordinarily high and is many orders of magnitude higher than the concentration you could ever see in a salt marsh right after a spray, much less in the middle of Long Island
But
Sound.
if they die as youngsters before they get to be adults,
That's not
then there's
the
a problem
claim.
too.
The claim is that you put the stuff in a catch basin and adult lobsters die.
Don, what you're basically saying is you put it in the basin, and people are claiming it's leaching out and getting into the water column. You would expect to see the blue crabs die
Exactly.
first,
Well,
and you're not seeing that.
Again, in Great South Bay, we're not putting it in catch basins. We're putting it in the salt marsh.
I know, and
But
the crabs are not dying there, and they're getting larger landings.
This is the exposure scenario that you would expect. Again, if the claim is that you put methoprene in the water, crabs or lobsters, they just keel over and die. If that were the case, you would not expect crab landings to be up. You would expect them to be down.
Yeah, no, I disagree with you. Not that I expected the crab landing. They totally feed differently. The blue crabs are a swimming crab.
Okay.
The lobsters live on the bottom. Their environments are totally different.
The crabs bury themselves.
In the winter, they bury
Yeah, they're
themselves.
also filter feeders, so
They
eat everything.
They're not filter feeders.
Well, like I say, there could be some strange things going on, but certainly, you know, the claim is that extraordinarily minute amounts cause extremely large effects. And if that were the case, you know, I think you wouldn't see it. The place you would expect to see it is in a place like the South Shore Bay.
Do we know how much of it is from agriculture?
Right.
I don't know how much is used in agriculture on like farm fields, things like that. Probably not very much. It's probably more pest control.
But compared to what the county is using,
Horse farms and stuff like that.
Yeah, probably not. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is that there are a lot of pesticides and a lot of toxics that are out there that are in runoff. And if you have a storm event, you have a runoff event, a whole suite of things that we know are way more toxic than methoprene are going to end up in the water, are going to end up in Long Island Sound. And if there's a toxic effect, which again is very questionable to begin with, you would expect the toxic effect to be from the things that are much more abundant in the environment and much more toxic. So again, I think that I know that there are people who passionately believe, that mosquito control chemicals have something to do with the lobster mortality. But every objective and reasonable look at the data, the scientific data, continues to come up with the same thing, that it's extraordinarily unlikely. And you can never prove a negative. You can never prove that there's some unknown thing going on, some unknown mechanism that's somehow doing this. But when you have a very good scientific explanation of why the lobsters died, I think that to hypothesize that some exotic mechanism is getting methoprene from mosquito control out and killing the lobsters, it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. And I think that it does a disservice to the lobster fishery, because the research and the effort should be looking at those things that are most likely to be killing the lobsters, so that we can maybe do something about them or somehow mitigate that. The time and effort that's being spent on these is frankly time and effort that's being wasted, and I don't think it's productive at this point. As far as wetland stewardship, there's a draft wetland stewardship plan, and we're in the process of finalizing it. I know Mike Kaufman had some comments on the language, not so much the substance, that we need to iron out, and I need to get together with Mike. It's a little tough for me in the summer. I'm hoping to finally get together with them and finally get the draft plan approved. We would like to get some of these higher level best management practices out there and working. We've published some of the data from the Wertheim pilot project in peer-reviewed literature. That project, it does look like it performed the way we expected it to perform. So the techniques seem to be viable. Obviously, we would not want to clone the Wertheim project everywhere. We have to look at each marsh individually, but I think there's a lot of promise in terms of getting some pesticide reduction through wetlands management. And one of the things, in addition to the technical paper we published, we were asked to put together a review paper about this, which we did with some of our colleagues from Connecticut and University of Rhode Island Fish and Wildlife Service. And the take-home message from our experience here and in Connecticut and New England is that it is possible to do wetlands management that's compatible both with natural resources and mosquito control. And I think that's a good lesson, and hopefully we can implement that.
And we get to see the report?
Which report?
Wetlands plan. That comes back to CEQ?
Yes.
Just to let the group know, I've been involved with pesticide management for quite a while. I'm vice chairman of the committee. I've also been working with the wetland stuff. Dominic, in cooperation with the consultant, prepared a final report. As he said, it's in draft form. There's some issues with conformance with seeker, which I've been going over. I'm not touching the substance of the plan. That's Dominic's call and the department's call. But there's some language changes that have to be made, and again, conformance with seeker to make it fit in with the EIS that was previously done, et cetera. That's basically what we're focusing on. I have 26 comments on it, and Dom and I were talking earlier. We're just going to sit down. We're just going to go through it again. It's mostly language changes. Some of it's seeker because I'm sensitive to that stuff. As to the, do you get a rash? Do I get a what? Go eat some methadone. The substance of it will come to the committee itself and the commission. I'm sorry, and you all can judge for yourselves. It's an aggressive plan and has a lot of interesting features to it.
And I think, to be fair, the upheaval with the change of administration and the budget and the elimination of the Department of Environment and Energy kind of set back the process because it had to be sorted out all over again as to exactly who does what, because it's fundamentally, it's not a vector control plan and project. It's fundamentally, well, formerly in energy and environment, now planning and planning, environment, economic development. So, you know, there have been some rough spots in terms of exactly who was going to do this stuff, but I think that's being straightened out now, and hopefully we can get some good work done.
Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. A couple of basic questions as a non-scientist. Do mosquitoes overwinter as eggs, and are they laid in water?
It depends upon the species. Some species overwinter as eggs, usually not in the water itself, like salt marsh mosquitoes. They're deposited in the surface of the salt marsh. Container breeders, they'll be in the containers. Other species overwinter as larvae. That's relatively unusual. The Culex mosquitoes that bite birds and amplify West Nile virus overwinter as adults. And they basically find places that get neither too hot nor too cold, cellars, places like that, and they'll overwinter as adults. So it varies a lot by species.
Okay. My second question, I hope this doesn't sound as dumb as I reviewed it in my mind, but we're talking about those deep water lobsters. You said the methoprene was in minute amounts?
Parts per billion.
Yeah, parts per billion.
Okay. Is it possible that it's not really methoprene, it's a molecule that mimics methoprene, or it is a decomposition product of a larger molecule?
That's one of the technical questions, because methoprene is a relatively simple molecule. It's a juvenile hormone mimic. So there are natural materials that you naturally find in lobsters that are chemically very similar to methoprene. So it's a big technical challenge to separate out the methoprene from these very similar things. And as you can imagine, you know, you're mashing up a lobster. There's thousands of compounds. Separating them and detecting these minute concentrations is a very significant technical challenge. So that's one reason why until I see more and better data and independently confirmed. For instance, when we did our sampling as part of the long-term plan, the labs, 2 labs were involved. They exchanged samples. They checked each other, which is what you should do in these kinds of things. As of yet, that hasn't been done with these samples, and considering how technically difficult it is, I think, and even Connecticut DEP themselves will say, we don't know what, if anything, these results mean. So let's see if they're confirmed. Let's see if we get more data. Let's see what's going on before we react too much.
So there's a kind of giant standard deviation when they do these.
Yeah, and again, it was very puzzling because there was no relationship between whether the lobsters were sick or healthy in terms of what they found.
Even their catch protocols were off. They didn't do it sterile.
Oh.
I mean, that's how crazy it was.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of concern, and I think, to be fair, what they were attempting to do was extremely difficult. And interestingly enough, one of the things that went into this is they basically said, we'll do a few samples. We don't expect to find these products, so hopefully that'll put the issue to bed. Instead, they got these results. So that's why you have to be real cautious if you're going to be looking for these kinds of things and you're going to be doing this kind of technically difficult thing. You don't want to do it on the cheap. You don't want to do it on the quick. You want to do it with substantial resources behind it that you can really, really do a good job. Because, like I say, it's a difficult thing to do. And the implications are really, are really high. Because again, if those results turned out to be accurate, we'd have to completely rethink our understanding of how methoprene and resmethrin behave in the environment.
It was like what scientists call, what is it, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation for a phenomenon is probably the right answer.
And I think in terms of the lobster mortality, the simplest explanation is it just got too hot too quickly and the lobsters keeled over.
Well, whatever it's worth, there's a sale at Uncle Giuseppe's, and I'm buying lobster for myself and my mom, and I'm not kidding you.
What are we supposed to do?
$2.99 a pound.
What we have to do today, board members, is we have
It's a
to...
type 2.
Yes, is it a type 2? We're recommending it's a type 2. And we
Well,
just have
it's informational report.
Yes, that's
There's
it.
no real action occurring. We're receiving something.
It's a type 2 action.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second?
Second.
Seconded by Eva. All in favor?
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
On the committee. Dominic, you had mentioned that there are some changes in the 13 work plan over the 12 work plan. And and I don't see. I see a list of the larvicides, but not the adulticides in the work plan. And there is mention of moving from more of a focus on resmethrin to allowing the use of malathion. And malathion is a neurotoxin. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism. I know it's a organophosphate. The resmethrin, I'm not exactly sure how that...
Can you show me where malathion is in that? Because
yeah, so if you go to page 8, it says malathion, in addition to the pyrethroid, malathion and organophosphate pesticide was identified as a potential adulticide. Malathion would be used under very specialized conditions that are unlikely to happen. Yeah. It just seems to me it's opening the door for that.
Well, that's straight out of the long-term plan. The long-term plan identifies malathion as a potential material. Again, if the other materials somehow didn't work or there was some sort of emergency. Point of fact, we haven't used malathion since, I'd say, 2004 or probably earlier than that. You know, we don't stock it. We don't maintain the application equipment that's suitable for malathion. You'd have to completely redo your application equipment.
Would this plan allow you to use it versus 2012, which
no,
did not
specify? That's the same language as the previous.
So that language was in that.
And that's, again, that's straight out of the law.
Are there other changes in terms of the chemicals that you would have discretion to use under the 13 work plan versus 12?
No.
Okay, let me just ask you one question about malathion, because as you know, I've expressed concern about salt marshes and, not malathion, methoprene. And you quoted this Connecticut study, which I have not seen. I had seen another study that looked at the exoskeletons of lobsters and found a weakening through the use of methoprene. And obviously, it is not. You don't use it to kill adult mosquitoes. You use it to keep the juvenile mosquitoes from maturing. So it's a very, you know, you wouldn't expect it to be a toxin for an adult lobster. You'd expect it to somehow maybe weaken the exoskeleton, making it more vulnerable to diseases in an environment. If you just in a laboratory exposed an adult lobster to methoprene, you probably wouldn't see any ill effects. But out there in the real world, when the lobsters are maturing, if they have a weaker immune system, if they have a weaker exoskeleton, you might see some effects. Even if the temperature changed, it might be a component to a die-off.
Well, so the thing to keep in mind is that the concentration, I'm not sure about shell weakening, but even for sublethal effects like that, the concentrations required are orders of magnitude higher than the exposures from mosquito control. And the other thing you have to remember about these studies is that they're usually a much longer duration. It might be several days or even longer. What we find when we put methoprene in the salt marsh is you see it in the part per billion level, maybe the day of the application, maybe the day after, and in almost all cases it goes down to the parts per trillion levels where you have a hard time even detecting it. So
you would have to really know at what part per billion or at what part it starts to have a problem with the organism. So sometimes a part per billion is not an issue, in drinking water, etc. But some chemicals at very small concentrations can affect the nervous system, endocrine system.
Yeah, but not in the case of methylpredine. In methylpredine, the concentrations where you find toxic effects are, again, you know, hundreds, sometimes thousands of times higher than you see in the environment.
What I'd like is, for my own edification, one is to, if you could tell me that Connecticut study so I could at least look at it, and to know that it's under further review, and BTI, which I haven't seen any negative consequences from, if that is the larvicide of first choice that in salt marshes, that would give me some solace. And I'd like to further review that study, because those concentrations that you spoke of before are alarming. And you may say, well, it doesn't make any sense, but for somebody who has a scientific background, I'd like to at least take a look at the study. And it is a red flag.
Now, which Connecticut study are you referring to?
Yeah, that had both the it had the methylpredine, you said, and you listed another chemical that they also were detecting.
Yeah, they're also looking for
malathion. They didn't publish that one.
No, it's not published.
Yeah, that came up in one of their bulletins on the internet, that they found something, then they never published it.
It's basically a press release.
Yeah, it was a press release. There was no formal study.
Out of what? It was at a university?
No, it was Connecticut DEP.
Literally. I'm not sure which lab. It might have been a university lab that did it.
Yeah, but it came out over their website.
Yeah. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. This is extremely preliminary results that have not passed scientific review.
There's been no study of it.
Peer-reviewed literature.
That may be true, but it ought to be a cautionary note when something. And this is not a fly-by-night organization. It's Connecticut DEP. So I think to just completely dismiss it is wrong.
Here's where you
I think we got to go and take a look at it if we're going to be putting this into our environment.
Hold up a second. The report came out on the Connecticut DEP website. That's where you find this thing. Okay,
a governmental website.
It's about that long, literally. Okay, in back channel conversations between the various scientific organizations, AMA, etc. Yeah, there's been a lot of information that's out there. None of it has, to my knowledge, as of a couple of weeks ago, has been published, because nobody knows what to do with it. They can't replicate it. They don't know exactly what's going on. So there's been no formal study. It's literally an announcement. Because this data is suspect, because the data, nobody can figure out what's going on with it or anything like that, there has been no formal paper written on it.
I've got the material that was sent to me. I can certainly forward that to you.
Sure. I mean, what's the right course of action? To suspend the use until we have more information?
Well,
okay, then we should at the least, gather more information and find out who conducted the study. Maybe we do need to do further research here. This is actually an alarming piece of information.
Well,
I doubt it.
Again, we have done a lot of work here. You know, we've spent a lot of money. We've had Stony Brook University. We've had USGS look at our methylpredine use, look at how much gets in the environment, look at its toxicity. And to throw out all that information.
I'm not suggesting that, Dominic, and you guys have done it.
Don't get defensive about
You've done a good
He's
job.
asking you for information to go with that.
I voted for the work plan. Okay, after I heard all the other arguments, I listened to the Baykeeper, etc., and I voted for that work plan that had methylpredine in it. This is new information that at least warrants our attention.
Oh yeah, well I got a bunch of stuff on file. I can email that to you. I'll do that later on today.
As a legislator that represents one of the largest districts with an important marine component, the lobster industry is very important on the East End. This warrants taking a closer look at, no doubt. Now, I'm not saying don't approve it, but let's not just blanket dismiss it either, because it could provide information that does cause us to change course.
Well, I understand that DEP is doing some additional sampling, and we're all anxious to see the results.
Dominic, thank you very much for your presentation. If you could please send that information to Legislator Schneiderman that he requested, we'd appreciate it. Yes.
Wouldn't it be wise to do some testing the presence of methylprednisolone and other insecticides in crabs, just to ensure that you're not having any effects on the crab population? And two, I know it's a real long shot, but there's no potential human health impact.
Well, human health has been looked at really thoroughly.
But if you haven't tested crabs, you don't know what's... How
But
can
we
you...
do know, but the World Health Organization approves methylprednisolone for use in drinking water. Again, it's a matter of, it's also a matter of funding. You know,
I understand the budgeting problem.
It's not cheap, and if you're going to do it, you need to do it the right way.
Michael, it affects arthropods. It doesn't affect humans at all.
Yeah,
So it's non-toxic to humans, and nobody's debating that.
Okay.
Well, some of the others are, though.
Some of the others are.
Yeah.
All right, Dominic, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next, under other business, the Montauk County Park Observatory. Who was here to speak about that?
Do you want to have
Yes, I want to
one of
have...
these guys introduce it first?
Yeah, Nick, do you have something to introduce to us about this?
Just real briefly, for the benefit of probably over half of the CDQ wasn't present the last time that the council had heard on this project. I think it dates back to 2007. So about 5 years since we last heard from this group. The previous project was for an expansion to an existing cabin down by the Third House complex. For those of you who are familiar with Montauk County Park, the expansion was going to be in keeping with the overall architecture and appearance of the site. However, it was in the immediate vicinity of Third House itself, and certainly it altered a historic structure within that area of the park. This proposal is for this facility to be installed up at the Gator facility. Gator is ground, air, transmit, receive. It dates from the 1950s, post-World War II cold era. It was a military installation that's now been incorporated into the overall park. You've heard of Gator before because there's an array of poles left over up there for the military installation, and 2 of them were approved by this council for replacement and the installation of radio communication monopoles. That project has not moved forward at this point in time, but it is in the immediate vicinity of those array of poles, and there's 2 structures up there on site. One was adaptively reused for our maintenance facility. I can't recall. I believe that project did come to the council, but it was no change in footprint to the existing structure. However, I think there was recognition by the council that the overall site, as it related to the military use, Cold War era, had some historical significance, so the council weighed in on the colors of the buildings, what have you, as was the case with the poles that we wanted to replace. The council required that the poles not exceed the height of the existing poles that are there, that they conform to the color and overall appearance of the site. Now the Montauk Observatory Group has approached the department. They've looked at the Gator site. They're interested in having the facility installed at Gator. It provides additional benefits to them that the Third House site didn't. Parks overall likes the concept because it gets it away from the most historically significant portion of the property in terms of the what I'll say is the historical period. There's a prehistorical interest in the entire park as well. I can let Rich speak to that, but the entire park as a whole has historical significance. But it's fair to say that moving the facility up to Gator has less historic issues than having it down at the Third House site. The last thing I'll add on that is that for the installation of the monopoles, the historic committee and essentially the trust, the CEQ acting as the trust, required that we do a phase 1AB, I think it is, archaeological assessment of the site prior to that monopole project moving forward, because there was some concerns as to whether or not there was any prehistoric significance subsurface below grade at the site. This project, as it's going to be presented to you today, is to be contained entirely on an existing paved area. So
as a new structure, or
a new structure installed on an existing paved area.
The paved area prehistoric?
The other thing I want to add is that parks, we brought it today, other business as for informational purposes only. We want an opportunity for the council and the trust to comment back to the group so that they get a better handle on what it is that the council might be looking for in terms of the design, sensitivity of the site, what have you. Rich and I and others at Parks have been working with the group to explain what it is that's required for this process, the EAF, etc. And they're aware of that. So today is really an introduction or reintroduction of the topic, new site, and we'll go from here. There'll be a formal application at a subsequent CEP meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Who was here to speak today about that?
Morning.
State your name, please.
My name is Sean Tavalia. I'm an associate professor of physical science at Suffolk Community College, and I'm also a founding board member of Montauk Observatory. And
just 1 minute, sure. Eva, you wanted to say something, please?
Just for the record, I wanted to announce that I will be recusing myself from the process of the CEQ, as I am part and parcel of the Montauk Observatory building that's being.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say for the record, this is the primary reason I came today too for this Montauk Observatory process.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I'll start just giving a brief overview. Nick did a great job of giving the overview. We just basically started in 2006. The mission of the Montauk Observatory is really just to provide free scientific education to all the public on Long Island, specifically the East End. With that in mind, it's been our major goal to produce an observatory on the East End, similar to what we have on North Shore at Custer. The Montauk Observatory plan is to produce an observatory that would be operated remotely. That was our initial plan. We do have the telescope, and we now have the dome facility. Along with the remote operation of the dome, in other words, any member of, anybody throughout our community would be able to access the telescope through the internet and have basically a view of research-grade telescope through their armchair computer and have access to the dark skies of Montauk. And we'd be able to provide that access to all the local school districts or any other amateur scientists across Long Island with our belief basically that astronomy is a gateway science. It's usually that one little bit of looking up in the stars that draws everybody else to all the other sciences, whether it's chemistry, geology, biology, what have you. Originally the plan was to locate it at the Third House site, and originally, as Nick suggested, we were looking at renovating one of the cabins. I believe it's called the bunkhouse at the site. Unfortunately, with an observatory, there are some limits that we can do. And observatories are essentially a beautiful thing in terms of the environment because they really need to preserve the environment. We need to have very little disruption. And the Third House site originally, great site, great location, except using a wood structure in an observatory has some limits. And one is that it holds heat and it makes observing a little difficult due to thermal waves in the air. Now, in 2006, 2007, we approached that. We've since moved on and come back to this location. Our current building structure is a prefab design. It's a fiberglass dome that is already in our possession. It's a 15-foot fiberglass dome. It would house the 20-inch Meade RCX that we have, and we locate it just to the north of, I believe it's the maintenance site on the Gator property, on a slab that is already there. And I've also brought Jeffrey Katz from Custer Observatory, if you have any questions in terms of the installation of that dome and how it would affect. Jeffrey Katz basically removed it from its prior location before bringing it to us. In terms of producing the dome at the site, like I said, it would be very limited in terms of what we'd be doing at the site. There would be very few people accessing the Gator property, as it is a remotely operated observatory. So at any time, if we ever needed it to use it, would maybe be four or five people going up just for general maintenance and equipment uses. Everything else would be done online, and all of our lecture programs and whatnot would still be handled outside, typically at Third House or other locations around East Hampton. that's just a brief overview, and basically entertain any questions that the committee has on in terms of the installation and impacts of the observatory.
Go ahead, Mike.
Question. Given the location, basically the tip of the southern fork, is that going to reduce the potential for light pollution impacting the
That's what the site was chosen in Montauk for a number of reasons. One, Montauk is beautiful, and also it is the best skies that we have in our area. It's one of the darkest night skies on the East Coast. So we really do limit the light pollution from any other area.
Larry?
Oh, so what is your actual proposal? To build a new building to house this dome?
Yes, the proposal is to build the install the prefab structure at the Gator site.
On the asphalt?
On the asphalt.
And how big will this be?
It's a 15-foot dome, with a 15-foot radius. In terms of its height, I'll defer to Jeff.
I'm not positive, but I believe, as I didn't bring in any information on specifics, but I believe that there are 1-foot rings, 6 of them, which brings the base of the rotating part of the dome up to about a little over 6 feet. And then the dome itself probably gets you to about 13 to 14 feet peak. But I'm not positive about that. I didn't bring my drawings with me.
And who pays for this?
We do.
Who's we?
Montauk Observatory.
Mary Ann.
Through donations and other.
Mary Ann?
This slab, what's the dimension of the existing cement slab?
The existing slab is 14 foot 7 inches.
Square?
Rectangular. So it's a width of 14 foot 7 inches, and I believe it was 32 or 30 feet long.
And that is more than sufficient to house your...
That would require us to extend the width of the slab or find a different location on site. Either way, not...
So that is not sufficient.
Right.
But by minute math, because the 15 feet is the actual exterior dimension of the dome, so there will be strategic columns of concrete that will go into the ground through sonotubes that will provide the extensions around that shortened dimension. So we'll increase it by another 2 feet roughly to 17 and change.
Right,
so it's not a big extension.
But you will have to increase the actual
either
foundation that's existing there.
Either increase the slab width, or as we've been speaking with the Parks Department, just a different location within the site that's already being utilized.
Remember this disturbed site.
Go ahead, Mike.
What kind of security is there going to be over there? I've not been out to that park myself.
The Gator site is completely fenced in and locked.
Right, so it would be locked at night. Have you had any issues, Nick, with people getting on there? Basically, if you're going to be having a scope and electronic equipment, you have to be, a little bit worried about, shall we say, some of the proclivities of Suffolk County residents and others.
I would offer that currently the scope is located in a closet at the park, so moving it to this site would actually offer more security.
Any other questions? Okay. Legislator Schneiderman?
Just to add a couple things. One is, a few years ago we designated that park as a dark sky park. It's the first, I believe, in New York State, and it's certainly the first in the county. We, the county, have spent tens, hundreds of millions of dollars preserving open space, a lot in Montauk. County owns significant holdings, and that has actually contributed to the fact that we have stellar dark skies. So if you've been out to Montauk in summer, spring, winter, fall, and you look up, it's a extraordinary experience. It's a natural resource that we have protected that we're losing throughout the country, but we have done a good job to protect that. We have the ability to take advantage of it. There was a master plan done for the park, and maybe 20 years ago now, and it did specifically say that astronomy would be a very good use for this park, particularly tied in with other environmental education, so it creates an experience, not only by day, maybe doing your pond studies and water assays, whatever it might be, and in the evening you have the opportunity to go look at the stars and learn about the universe. And there's just so much there potentially for an environmental center, and this could be a key component to it. The site that they chose, obviously they need a high elevation. You don't have a lot of choices. This is kind of perfect because it's not an asphalt slab, it's actually a concrete slab. It's already there, it's behind the building, so it's not visible to the public in any way. It's at a site that's already not available to the public. It's completely closed to the public, so it's not going to interfere with park use in any way. And you know, I could say more, but this is a not-for-profit that is doing environmental, doing education, who I certainly think has done a great job. They held star parties, they're well-attended lectures, and this is just one component of their operation, and they have a very sophisticated piece of equipment. And keeping it in the closet is terrible because they have to wheel it out, and these are very sensitive optics. They need a permanent location, although this proposal I think is for a temporary use as a trial basis. But they really need to get this in a spot with a dome to do the light shielding that they need, and allow the scientific community and occasionally beyond that the ability to take advantage of our incredible dark skies. So I certainly support this.
Yeah, we've had wonderful support from the community, and it even includes, we do have a letter of support from the concerned citizens of Montauk supporting the structure.
Rich?
This is a designated park, is that right?
This is within Third House Park. It's kind of off to the side.
It's designated by the county as a park.
Yes.
Right? This is a park activity?
Yes.
Or is it some figment of your imagination?
This is a public.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about alienation.
No.
Okay.
No, we are completely...
What are you asking us to do?
Well, today they're just giving us a preliminary description of what their project is. They have to still go through the
That's correct.
EAF form and come to the board when they're ready with their EAF form and their plans. This is just a preliminary to get some ideas from us if there's anything more they should consider before they actually sit down and do the EAF and come up with plans.
I think one of the things in the past, and again, that Gator project goes back a number of years, but one of the things that was very much of interest of the council was to have renderings done that showed what the overall facility would look like once it was installed, that is the monopoles, and what the visual impacts would be to the site from a variety of vantage points. And as this would be new construction on the site, I would suggest that that's probably something that the council would like to. It wouldn't specifically be, although the visual impacts are incorporated within the EAF, there's no real substitute for actually showing a representation that would, for the benefit of those of you who haven't been there, most hadn't, how the building conforms and fits in with the overall appearance of the site.
Nick, would a computer simulation suffice?
That's fine.
So if we basically took a photo of the slab and then imposed the building, which we have pictures of as well, in that spot, that would be...
And we've talked about that, you know,
Suffice?
amongst ourselves, but for the benefit of the council. And those are the types of things I think would be helpful today. Any of that homework that you would like to put back on the group and parks, so that we know when we come back we have a complete application and we can take a formal review.
I think that would be an excellent adjunct to an EAF.
Yes.
Right.
And it would give us a good idea of what this thing is going to look like.
Yes. Mary Ann?
And also, I think I would like to know, for my own self, is that once it's up and running, how do you expect people to access it?
It's actually operated through an internet connection. So Montauk, we already have a website, montaukobservatory.com. So if you wanted to access the telescope remotely, you would go to our website, and there would be just another link that says access the telescope, and it would allow you to log in, tell the telescope where to point.
We should have that as part of the EAF, as an explanation.
Yeah, that's all in here.
This is how the public will be able to, not that I'm a member of the public, but I'd like to be able to
I brought some proposals. I can leave this with the committee.
The other thing is you could be dealing with Mike Kaufman, you know. That'd be a good thing.
Mary Ann, did you want to say something?
Well, going back to what Nick said, when we looked at this site for the cell phone towers, we were given very good visuals of the existing towers, and I think we should pull that, or they should have that as part. I think the more complete your presentation, the easier it will be for us to work on it. And also there are archaeological concerns that need to be addressed on that site.
Not from this, because there's just a dome going on, a pre-existing concrete slab. There's no excavation.
Well, but and my understanding is that this pre-existing concrete slab will be extended.
No.
Possibly.
Possibly by no more than about 2 feet.
Okay. But that has to be all in the formal application.
Yes, make sure that's incorporated in the EAF.
Okay.
Yes, it will be.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's, Sean, maybe you don't need to extend the slab if you're gonna have to spend thousands of dollars on archaeology. So it's something just to look at. I'm concerned because they're not for profit.
Okay.
That if they have a lot of surveying and things like this to do, that they'll end up giving up, which I don't want to say. So it.
With all due respect, I mean, if they make the argument that extending an existing slab 2 feet is not going to be an archaeological, right? They need to make the argument. They need to.
At this point,
just say
they need to say it.
What you guys actually need versus maybe the standard protocols are for surveys and things like that. Architectural drawings. We have the actual dome. I mean, we have schematics.
Right.
So you know exactly what it's going to look like. We can show it. Rather than surveying it, we can maybe use an aerial to show you the slab that's there.
Whatever. Just so that we have
right.
So that when it comes, there's enough information so that we're not just giving permission in the dark.
Trying to keep the cost down for these guys.
Okay.
Mike.
Hey.
I would suggest, as somebody who has an archaeology degree, undergraduate, when and if the thing is added onto the concrete slab, if they're going to put down basic concrete posts, have Nick or one of his people over there, and as they dig it out a couple, they got to go 4 feet down to avoid the frost line, look into the hole.
I would suggest somebody with a degree.
There you go, Michael.
I've dug around the world. Why not?
Okay, I'm not an archaeologist, but I have done several concrete slabs. And chances are, when that slab was put in,
they dug the area up.
They dug a much larger area.
Frankly, the entire Gator site was
mold
disturbed.
and then backfilled. So that 2 feet around it is already fully disturbed.
Well, then make that argument in the EAL. That's all I suggest.
And you're going to look for arrowheads or charcoal in there. That's all you do.
That's all.
Fully disturbed that 2 feet.
Sure, I'll bring my shovel with me.
I'll fully disturb it. Maybe that could be true.
All righty. Any other concerns with the issue? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. One thing left. Other concerns?
We're all concerned.
Yes.
CAC members.
And there's no CAC members here today.
No, there are not.
Next month's meeting, Thanksgiving comes very early this month. It's November 22nd. So our next meeting is actually Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which is a really rough day. I mean, I'll probably be traveling that day. And I think maybe many of us will be. So I propose that we consider perhaps just canceling the November meeting.
If we can. Remember,
depending on what's going on.
You have to do it.
How's our...
what does it look like?
Yeah, what does it look like,
Michael?
As of now, the only thing I could see is the laid on tables from the 20th. I haven't heard of any other projects that are coming down the pike, but you never know.
Budgets and things like that have started to come out.
Right.
So that's.
But I mean, well, the laid on tables. We're not directly dealing with the budget.
I know.
May I ask a question? So if we don't meet in November, how do we look in December? Does Christmas come early this year? No, I mean,
we always meet the second Wednesday in December.
Okay.
So we will be meeting, but
okay, and we can't meet the second. If something comes up that we have to do, can we meet the second Wednesday in November?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, we can meet.
So that would be if there was something that you felt we really should.
Oh, you're saying the meeting right now is the day before Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Right.
Move it up if we need to. That would be my.
If we need to, that's all I'm saying.
Is that of Thanksgiving?
What was that, Rich?
He understands.
So if something comes up, we have to do it.
We'll meet the
We'll shoot
second
for the
one.
14th.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Right. Otherwise,
cancel.
yeah,
Otherwise,
that makes
okay.
sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Good suggestion. Okay, is there a motion to close the meeting?
Motion to close the meeting.
Seconded by Mary Ann. Well, motion passed.
He always
Thank
gets
you,
in there ahead of me.